It's the bye week, everybody. Welcome to the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Roob, how's your bye week going?
It's going well. I'm doing a lot of self-scouting, a lot of quality control work. Kind of went through my 10 observations to make sure I didn't have like 8 one week and 12 the next week. But it looks like kind of consistently around 10. So I feel pretty good about it. But I got a lot to dive into.
Yeah, it's kind of weird being this early in the season. We're used to, 8 games have gone by and then there's a bye week and it all makes sense. But yeah, I guess the process for the team has to be pretty similar, even though it's a smaller sample size.
Yeah, well, there's certainly no shortage of things that they need to take a look at. So I think the timing works out pretty well.
Yeah, it does. Hoping you're getting some downtime. I know we're doing 2 pods this week. We wanted to keep to our schedule if we could. But yeah, it's a good time to get a little bit of downtime. I'm down the shore right now. I was on the beach this morning. It was nice.
Really?
Yeah.
Finally a nice day. I think it's the first time I've seen the sun in like 2 weeks. I went away for a few days. Just got back and feeling recharged and re-energized and ready to get going.
Good. It's funny. Normally I take a trip during the bye week, but after Brazil and New Orleans and Tampa within a month, I was like, I'm gonna stay around the area for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a lot. And it's a lot for them. And I don't know, somebody tweeted to me and said, stop making excuses for them and talking about all the road games they've had. It's a factor. I think they've flown over 14,000 miles since the start of the season. That's a lot. You have too. So I'm sure it's taking a lot out of you.
Yeah, I don't have to play football games on the end of my trips, so maybe a little easier for me. But you're right. I mean, like
you're playing hockey, and it might be one of the reasons you got hurt.
Maybe. Yeah, that's probably true. I like that. It's not that I'm old; it's that I've been traveling a bunch.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't excuse poor play, but it makes you think that, okay, now's a pretty good time to get the bye week and for those guys to take a little breather, refresh, and then get back to work next week.
Yeah, and they'll be back on the field Wednesday, and we'll be down there.
Yep. So today we don't have predetermined topics. We just have a bunch of questions. The email inbox has been flooded since the game on Sunday. So we have some that we didn't get to the other day, and then we had a whole new group of them come in. So I don't even know if we'll get to all the questions today, but we want to try to get through as many as we can. A reminder, the email address is eagleeye@NBCUni. That's NBCUNI.com. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you have the QR code. You can scan it and send your questions in that way. I'll leave that little bug on the screen if you're watching throughout the pod. You guys can feel free to scan whenever you want and send in a question. But let's get to it. The first question today comes from Eddie. How is it the teams we face are always encouraged to blitz us a lot, yet for the past few years, we've seemed to be so reluctant in playing aggressive defense, especially when it comes to blitz packages? Do you think this comes from choosing the wrong people for DC roles or not trusting the players that we have to execute a similar system? It's clear that a lot of QBs in the league tend to struggle when blitzed, including Jalen, and the Eagles seem to be the only team not wanting to jump on that boat. I believe it's a very key reason why our defense looks so fragile each year. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't know how fragile they look each year. I mean, 2 years ago, they had a number 2 defense in the NFL. I think in general, you have coordinators whose philosophy is we can generate pressure with our front. We don't need to blitz. And look, when you blitz, you're taking somebody out of coverage. And if you can do that, if you can generate pressure like they did 2 years ago without blitzing, you have an advantage. I think, you find little opportunities to do it, but there's different ways to skin a cat. I think there's a lot. I don't know if it's true that there's a lot of quarterbacks that struggle with the blitz. You see a lot of young quarterbacks come up, and I think this has changed. That it used to be quarterbacks coming out of college, they didn't play in sophisticated passing offenses. Now they do, and they see a lot of the stuff that they're going to see in the league. And because of that, I think a lot of guys, you see some of these quarterbacks getting rid of the ball really quick. And if you blitz them, they're just going to dump it off to the hot. And Jalen struggled with that at times. But I wouldn't say most quarterbacks in the league do. I think if you see an advantage there, you're going to do it. I also think the Eagles don't have great blitzers. We saw Zach Bond get a couple sacks in the opener, but you're putting yourself in a risky position if you blitz and they don't get there. And I think that's what a lot of coaches are afraid of, and what maybe why they don't do it as much.
Yeah, and it's not like super rare in the league to have coordinators that don't blitz a ton. And Vic has done it here and there. He talked about it in the summer that, in order to blitz, the players have to show him that they're capable of it. And I do think the Eagles have some players who can blitz. Zach Bond, obviously, with his history as an edge rusher, can blitz. I think Nakobe Dean has that ability. He showed that in college. Vontae, a few years ago from the nickel spot, was someone who you liked as a blitzer. I don't know if that's still the case with him. They have some guys to do it. I think and Vic Fangio has mentioned this, the one thing you don't want to get into the area of is like needing to blitz to generate pass rush. That's a spot coordinators don't want to be. The blitz is supposed to be like a change of pace, catch the offense off guard. You get into trouble when you realize that you don't have enough pass rushers to get home, and then you have to generate pressure via the blitz or like crazy stunts up front. You want to dictate those things, not have your poor pass rush dictate it. Now, the problem with where the Eagles are right now is that their front four or front five on occasion just isn't getting home.
Yeah, and the problem is when you blitz somebody and they don't get there, you got somebody out there wide open. And capable NFL quarterbacks are going to find that guy, and that's the risk. And especially when you have a really poor tackling team, now you have one less guy out there, who can try to tackle the receiver, and you can have a big play. So it's not like a panacea. It's something you do. Yeah, like Dave said, it's something you do. Pick and choose your spots, and it'll be effective. But it's not something you want to do out of desperation.
All right, next question here from Ian. Hey, Reuben, Dave. I can't remember the last time the Eagles came out and looked ready to play. I was listening to Nick Saban talk at halftime on Saturday, Bama versus Georgia, about how good teams can be when teams are on their game-planned script of plays, but how it's a different game once the script runs out. He talked about how capable Georgia was to come back. He was very correct about all of this, and it made me think about the Eagles. Why can't the Eagles get fast starts? Why do they never seem ready to play? Is this coaching or players or 50-50? It's easy to blame Sirianni, and I want to blame him, but perhaps I'm not thinking about this correctly. This team seems exactly like last year, and it seems like ownership made a huge mistake bringing Nick back. Where do you two sit on the decision? So really two different issues there. Maybe they're linked.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember they're 2-2. We're not 0-4. I'm not ready to say Jeff Lurie made a mistake yet, and we'll see how. I think these next 4 games are going to kind of give us an idea, because there are 4 teams that on paper the Eagles should be able to. 4 games they should be able to win. Even if they go 3-1, I think you can live with that. But I'm not ready to say you fire the guy. But I do think that it's a reflection on the coach more than anything when a team isn't ready. And he's right. Week after week, they come out flat. I mean, they haven't scored a touchdown in the first quarter since in their last 6 games, or a point. They haven't even scored a field goal, and they've given up, I believe, 34 points during that stretch, which isn't a huge number. It's enough, but I don't know who else. Certainly, the players have some role in that. But when a whole team week after week is just not mentally or physically ready when the game starts, I don't know who else to put that on.
Yeah, and because it predates Kellen Moore being here, I think we're more likely to say, well, it's Nick's problem. But look, Kellen Moore is also putting this game plan together too. So some of it has to fall on him. I think we had an email a while back that put out this theory that Nick's more involved in the opening script than he is after that. And I think that stands to reason, because like once the game gets going, it's probably more Kellen calling the plays. There's not as much time to put a lot of thought into it. But I think it is really troubling that, they sit there all week and come up with this opening script of plays that they think are going to work against that defense. And I know Kellen Moore talked about a lot of times the script is kind of figuring out what the defense is going to do against them the rest of the game, but they're putting their package of plays together that they think are going to work. And they're spending a week on it and it's not working. I do think that's pretty troubling.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it goes beyond that because I think some of the problems in the first quarter and first half and slow starts go beyond just play calling and scheme and that kind of. I just see a team that's just not all there, just not ready to play football at 1 o'clock on Sunday or 1:05 or whatever it is. They're just not ready. Whatever play is called, there might be some good plays in there, but they're just not ready to execute them. Sunday down in Tampa, they just seemed out of it when the game started. And it wasn't until the middle of the second quarter that they just seemed to wake up a little. And then they had a couple decent things happen, but then it was too late. And really, you have no margin of error when you're down 24-0. I think it goes beyond the script and the 15 because it's defense too. The whole team's just too often just not ready to play, and that's really concerning.
Yeah, I agree with that. From an offensive schematic standpoint, though, like, are there things that you think they can do to jumpstart it a little bit?
Get AJ back.
That'll help.
Get Devontae back and Lane. But these problems predate their injuries. It's gotten worse. I don't know. You say like get Saquon involved early. I think teams kind of stacking the box early, thinking they're going to try to get Saquon going early. I don't know. I really don't know what the answer is as far as play calling standpoint. I don't know if there is an answer other than get a new coach.
Yeah, I know at times like it seems like tempo will kind of get them in a rhythm. The problem with that is if you have a 3-and-out with tempo, you're off the field so quick. Yeah,
and that's the easiest way to get your defense worn down. You have 3-and-out, and defense goes back out there, and the other team has one of those, 16 play drives with short passing game, and next thing you know, the defense is gassed, and you're down 24-0. So tempo is great to kind of throw in as a change of pace, but you got to be really, really confident in your defense. And, they did it in 22 when they had a great defense because you're confident that they can get stops. But I'm not confident in this defense right now, certainly.
Next question from Jamel. Hello, Dave and Rube. Great show. You guys are my favorite pod. After a great game in New Orleans, the defense went back to its usual ways and got shredded by Baker Mayfield. I've come to this conclusion. My problem is not the players. The problem is not the coordinators. The problem is Jeffrey Lurie. Organizationally, the Eagles believe in the Vic Fangio style of defense. After Gannon and Desai running copycat versions of the scheme, they finally got the creator of the scheme. The problem is it does not work in today's NFL. It's been death by 1,000 paper cuts for years now, and it's hard to watch. Lurie needs to realize this and change the organizational approach of defense to a more aggressive style. What do you think?
They got like the fourth best record in the NFL over the last 10 years. I don't believe that. 2 years ago, they had one of the best defenses in franchise history. I think it's players. I think you can win with a lot of schemes, but you have to have good players to do it. 2 years ago, they had them. Right now, they really don't. I don't think it goes beyond that. I think the scheme is sound. I think it's a good one. Certainly nobody was complaining about the scheme after the Saints game. They held them at 219 yards and 12 points or whatever. I just think they don't have good enough players.
I think that's their biggest problem. I do agree with the premise of the question, though. It seems like this is the style of defense the Eagles as an organization prefer right now. Because even Jonathan Gannon, when he came here, we were expecting a lot of like Mike Zimmer staples. I went back and watched a lot of tape that I didn't need to. We were expecting like these double A-gap blitzes and stuff like that. And he didn't run a lot of it. And then as time went on, it became a lot of staples of like Fangio too high looks. And then obviously that's what Desai ran. And now that's clearly what Vic Fangio runs. So I think that there's definitely a preference for that. I know that when they went through the defensive coordinator search that landed on Sean Desai, like I think there was maybe it wasn't a complete killer if you didn't want to run this style of defense, but I think it's fair to say they like it and they wanted something like this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't think I think that I don't agree with the premise that you can't win playing this way. I think you can, and they have. They won a lot of games. They've won a lot of games playing this way.
Yeah, I wonder if there is room for, like, why are they so in love with this scheme? Like, why have they not been open-minded to other schemes if that's the case?
Well, I mean, that's a different question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I think if you have good players, you can win playing any kind of defense. I really believe that.
Yeah, I guess. I think that right now, though, with this defense, like you mentioned how good they were against the Saints, that's an atypical offense in the NFL. I think that's a problem. Like,
we also don't. It's not a huge sample size yet. I need to see more. I mean, if that's the only type of offense that they can have success against, then there's an issue. But I'm not sure that's the case. We'll see.
Okay, yeah, and look, I think sometimes it's going to be hard to divorce the scheme from the players because we're only seeing these players in this scheme. But yeah, I think it's fair to question a little bit.
I mean, I know there isn't a scheme out there that works if you can't tackle someone. And they can't tackle. There's just as bad a tackling team as I've ever seen.
Next question from Alfred. Hi, guys. Just a quick follow-up to my post-Saints email where I asked if we had rid ourselves of the stink of last year's collapse. This week's loss to the Bucs shows me that the stink remains, and I think we've found the source. It has to be Sirianni, right? Question. Do you feel that Hurts has respect for Sirianni's coaching style and skills, a few moments that may reveal his true feelings? His post-game comment of, we have our moments to define identity, that was after the Bucs game. A clip from Mic'd Up from the Dolphins game last year. Hurts and AJ converted on a 4th down with a near touchdown, and Sirianni is saying to Hurts, I went for it because I trust you, and Jalen's response was, you should. His almost inability to say a good word about Sirianni this offseason before they went on a summer break when asked a direct question about Sirianni's new role after the coordinator hires. To me, it seems that Hurts is far more mature and developed than we are witnessing, and he is being held back by immature play calling and coaching style. He knows it, but is too respectful to share it publicly.
I think he's just playing lousy. I mean, Nick's not even calling the plays for the most part, calling some. It's obvious that they're not best buddies. I don't know the extent of the disconnect between them, but they've won a lot of games with Nick and Jalen. So maybe it's gotten worse. I don't know. I also know it's a mistake to take anything Jalen says and try to like find the meaning in it. He's got a very vague way about him. Honestly, I don't know how big a problem it is. It's not an ideal situation. I think one of the things about bringing Kellen Moore in was to distance Jalen and Nick from each other. They don't have to do as much together anymore. But the turnovers keep coming. So I don't know. I don't think it's an ideal situation, but how much of an effect it has on the product, I'm not sure.
I think you're right. Like, it's tough to say this is like because of this or this is because of this, but we've heard Jalen for long enough now that there's clearly some kind of disconnect between him and the head coach, and it seems like he just can't, like, he physically can't bring himself to say something nice about Nick publicly, and we've seen it now several times. And I agree with you that you can get yourself into trouble trying to find meaning in every little thing Jalen says, but the flip side of that is everything Jalen says is there's thought behind it. Like, I don't think he's out there just willy-nilly saying the first thing that comes to his mind. I think there is thought behind it. So I wonder how much it like permeates the team and how much, having the two biggest leaders of the team not always in lockstep has an effect on the rest of the squad. I think this possible it does.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know to what extent.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's like starting a season off like this on kind of shaky ground with those two guys. Then you have a couple of losses. Like, you can see how it could become an issue.
Yeah, that's why I'm really intrigued by what we see when they come back, because these are games, talking about the Jaguars and the Browns. I mean, these are games they should win, should be competitive in. So if the issues we're seeing continue with the offense, with the slow starts with Jalen, then I think they're in some big trouble.
Did you hear after the Bucs game when, Jalen was basically asked, hey, you and Nick are the two big leaders on this team. Do you come up and like spend time together to talk about identity and that sort of thing? And he said, we have our moments.
We didn't carry all of Jalen, so I don't think I saw that, that part.
It's just like the latest example of here's a softball about Jalen or about Nick, and Jalen goes, nah.
I also think Jalen likes to keep people, I don't know, I'll say confused or guessing, or it's hard for me to know how to take different things he says. And I've been around him for 5 years now, and I still don't know. I mean, he could be asked a question about Devontae and be vague about him. I mean, they're obviously very close. I just don't know. I mean, sometimes he'll be asked a very simple question, and he'll just say, yeah, I don't understand the question. Just next. It's just, it's
But I should say, like, I was in that press conference, and that was not the tone of the press conference. Mm-hmm. Like, there are some times where Jalen is very short and he's getting in and out. Like, he was actually like answering questions.
He was. That's true. That's true. I'll have to go back and listen to it, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's how he answers questions about Nick. It just always will.
Probably not great.
No.
Next question from Justin. Hey guys, I've been a long-time listener and second-time emailer. When is enough with Darius Slay? As you probably know by now, he hopped on Micah Parsons' podcast and essentially laughed with him as he clowned his teammate CJ Gardner-Johnson. Why is Slay a captain? He's living off an old reputation. Yes, I know his coverage grades were decent, but he has regressed as a player and a leader. All last year, he would celebrate his own performance even when we lost. This year, he's doing the same, posting and deleting his career stats like that matters. He literally gave up the game-winning touchdown against the Falcons and then smiled and laughed with Drake London after the game. Then a rookie absolutely schools him in Tampa, but he dropped it, so Slay looks good on that play. Give me a break. I think 80% of the fan base is done with him. What say you, Dave and Rube? Be honest. Is he a good example of a captain and leader on this team? To most of us, it's obvious that he's not. Love your pod. I watch every single show. Thanks for everything you guys do.
Yeah, those are really good questions. And you wrote about Slay apologized. He apologized for the stats part of it. He said that wasn't appropriate, but he just tried to explain the CJ GJ part of it. And he said he had talked to CJ and he understood, and he said he was trying to. He said he don't just focus on the first 10 seconds of that. Listen to the whole thing, and where they said they're really close, and CJ, he was just trying to praise CJ's enthusiasm and energy. And I don't know. I don't like any of it, honestly. I don't like the one thing that doesn't bother me is talking to a player after a game. That's guys have been doing that forever since I started covering the Eagles. Guys from the other team, they know each other. They've worked out together. Maybe they went to school together. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is going on a podcast of a competitor in your division. I know they're close, but I don't like that. I just don't think that's appropriate. And certainly the stuff he said about his stats, the stuff he said about CJ, I don't like any of it. And I don't think it's conduct becoming of a captain. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Wouldn't cut him, wouldn't suspend him, but I just would like to see him use better judgment sometimes. And I think when you combine that with, I don't think he's been awful this year, but he hasn't been elite. And I think when you combine those two things, it's a bad look.
Yeah, I think we have to take each of these instances separately. Now, we'll put them together at the end because that's kind of what he's done in the last week or so. But let's start with the stats because that happened right after the game. He tweets out his, not stats, I guess. Some of them were stats. They're basically career achievements after a loss. I mean, that's just stupid. It's immature. And he's a 33-year-old player. But that's immaturity. He admitted that fans got under his skin and he did that and he regretted it and he apologized for that. So
why would he even do it in the first place?
Why?
Yeah.
I understand the human element of it. I think it's unwise and I think it's immature. But from his perspective, like he has people chirping at him after what honestly wasn't an awful game. It was like an okay game, but in his mind, he's still, he's had this great career and it got to him.
Don't go on social media.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I would advise him to do. But like I think at least I understand where that came from, right? Bad decision.
Yeah, I get
think
that.
A human moment from him, certainly not good, certainly indefensible. You can't do it. But I think it's easy to figure out how he got there.
I guess. I mean, we both have people ripping us on social media all the time. Mainly you. No, I'm kidding. But
yeah, it's mainly you doing it.
I don't sit there and like tweet out my awards or like whatever. I just.
Yeah, I know. It's something that's immature, and he shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing. Second and third thing. First is just being on Micah Parsons' podcast, right? And I understand why people have an issue with that. To me, like, I don't have as big an issue with that as I do the content of it. I think I'd be really careful talking about one of your teammates. Even if most of it is positive, there's a clip that gets pulled from that of you laughing with Micah Parsons about CJ Gardner-Johnson. And he eventually explained it saying that, me and CJ have laughed about this, knowing that, with all the trash he talks, if he doesn't perform well, fans and media are going to be on him. Like, that's fine. But I think it's just a really bad look to be doing it in such a public arena with a guy who is on the rival team. You put all of it together, and I understand why people are upset.
Yeah, I do too. And I also think his level of play factors into that. Like he's not playing bad. He's not playing good.
He's like an average cornerback right now.
2 interceptions in his last 31 games, and that's been his strength, his playmaking. He's just not doing it. So it bothers me.
Yeah. Now I think I understand why fans are mad. I don't think it's like a punishable offense. I think it's something where if I'm Nick Sirianni, I say, hey, maybe think about what you're doing before you do it. If I'm Nick Sirianni, I make sure that CJ is okay with it. I think it's tough to figure out what's going through CJ's mind all the time. That's the last thing you want is a rift on the team because of some stupid podcast.
Not just on the team, but in the same secondary.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that is something to worry about. As far as like stripping him of his captaincy, like that's not going to happen. He was voted a captain by his teammates. So I think that's kind of, I don't want to defend Slay because I think a lot of this is indefensible. But what I will say is like, I don't think fans see what he brings from his leadership. Like, I think we probably get a view of it a little closer. We know what his young teammates think of him. We see how much work he puts in with them. He mentioned he's like a different kind of leader than some of the other ones. I think that's certainly true, but like, I don't know. There have been a ton of players to come through over the last few years, young players who kind of rave about how much he's helped them.
Yeah, just ask Q or Cooper, and they'll go on and on and on.
Even a young Devontae.
Yeah. Quinion doesn't really go on and on about anything, but he will tell you how valuable Slay has been for him. And that's true for pretty much Eli Ricks. You ask anybody, Josh Jobe, any young corner that comes through, Slay's taking his time with them, and that's what leadership is. So I got no problem with him having to see. Just gotta calm it down a little on social media.
Yeah, and like I understand why some veteran like older players, retired players, are watching him on a Micah Parsons podcast going, what in the world is going on? I think things have kind of just changed naturally in the NFL, but I understand why that doesn't sit well with a lot of former players.
Yeah. I mean, when I started covering the team, nobody would go on a podcast for a guy from the other team. Because the internet hadn't been invented yet, so that was part of the reason. But it's just a bad look. It's just not the smartest thing.
Yeah, but would like Chuck Bednarik send a telegram to Player X from the Cowboys?
Player X, formerly Player Twitter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Next question.
Good question. Yeah.
And look, we got a lot of questions on Slay. I picked one of them. Now I understand it's a big topic right now, so we wanted to address it And I don't know. I think we did.
Yep.
Next question from Alistair. Hi, guys. Love the podcast.
Alistair? Mm-hmm. Wow, we have people named Alistair listening to the podcast?
Oh, we'll get through it. Yeah. Love the
Moving
podcast.
Up in the world. Alistair.
No hot takes, which is refreshing watching NFL podcasts and TV. I'm an Australian living in Oxfordshire, England right now. Started watching the NFL about 5 years ago, and it's the best version of football in the world. A couple quick points on the Eagles tackling. First, statistics. How do stat-generating companies, i.e. StatHead and PFF, differ so much on this? It can't be that hard to evaluate. Secondly, I guarantee you 100% that Jordan Mailata is the best tackler on the roster. His background is rugby league. The Australian Rugby League season finishes this week. Why not get a guy to come over for just 4 weeks and coach these guys up? Honestly, they would get better overnight. I see them trying to hit and disrupt rather than wrap up and stop. In Australia, in the rugby and Aussie rules circles, you would be labeled as a soft player if you tried to continually do that. I don't think they're soft. I think their technique is awful.
I think the problem more than the technique is just being out of position. That's been the problem. Guys lunging to make tackles, waving at guys when they're already past them. I think for the most part, and there's been a couple of cases of not wrapping up, but I mean, as far as the disparity in the tackle, I mean, it's tackling's always been, it's an unofficial stat. Missed tackles is an unofficial stat. It's just subjective. But I mean, there are some really huge differences in some guys. That's just always going to be the case. And if the league ever decides to make it an official stat and have like Elias Sports Bureau, who does the stats, actually come up with official tackle numbers and missed tackle numbers, that would be great. But I don't think that's going to happen. But rugby and football are two very different sports. And yeah, these guys have played football all their lives. You're not going to bring somebody in from another sport who's going to be able to help them with that. Yeah, I think it just goes back to being in position, being out of position. And how many times have we seen a guy miss a tackle and there's no other defenders near him? I mean, that just keeps happening. And, you hear numbers to the ball. If a ball carrier breaks the first tackle, there should be 3 guys there ready to, bring him down before he gains another 11 yards. And that hasn't been the case.
Yeah. First off, like the stat, yeah, it's going to be tough because it's like a player's running by me. I get a hand on him. Is that a missed tackle? PFF might say no. Next Gen might say yes. So it's easy to find the disparity through an entire football game when the team's not tackling well, right? Like if they're tackling well, the guy goes down. You'll have all these opportunities for missed tackles.
And we'll talk about like drops. Like, is that a drop? Like, I'm not in the press box anymore, but when I was, like, if a guy had a ball he didn't catch, was that a drop or not? And everybody kind of will debate it. It's the same way. Is that a missed tackle? Nah, it was, he didn't really have a good shot at him. Well, yeah, that was a missed. So there's just such a disparity in opinions, and that's why the numbers will never be the same. It's just a subjective thing. There's no right or wrong. I don't think there's a definition for what makes a missed tackle. Should he have tackled him? Yeah, but I don't know. I know whatever the number is, they're bad at it.
Thanks for that. Yeah, they are. And like I've heard a bunch of rugby people talk about like form tackling and how bad form is in American football. Yeah, maybe that's something to explore in the off season. Tough to do it during the season, like to bring over some outsider to help them learn how to tackle.
Yeah, it's a different sport, different rules, different equipment, different ball. I don't think there's. If it worked, somebody would have done it by now.
Oh, I think there have been attempts, though. I could be wrong about this, but I think that there have been attempts to. And like one of the big theories is that like in sports where they tackle without helmets, they don't have the inclination to throw their face mask in there, and they have to form tackle with their shoulders and their arms and their bodies. So I think there might be something to that. But
so you're saying get rid of helmets?
I am not, but you can understand an inclination to throw your face mask in there if you're protected or you think you're protected.
Sure.
Next question from Joe. Hey guys, love the pod and listen to all of them. Just wrapped up the latest one, and Roob's research highlighting Dick Bielski sent me down a rabbit hole. Thought Roob would appreciate that in 1955, his first year with the Eagles, Bielski made just 9 of 23 field goals, 39%, but made 2 over 50 yards. Incredibly rare for 1955. Big leg, but limited accuracy. I guess he was sort of the anti-Alex Henry. The Eagles left him unprotected before the 1960 NFL expansion draft, and he was taken by the Cowboys. Anyway, I love stuff like that. So, Roob, please keep up the oddball facts and stats. Even when Dave tries to keep the pod on schedule, it makes me laugh out loud every time. And a question. You both seem to agree that Howie should have just paid Haason Reddick, but why wouldn't Reddick just play the final year of his contract for $14.5 million and become a free agent? Javon Hargrave played the final year of his deal, 3 years, $39 million without a word, and then signed a 4-year, $84 million deal, proving he was pretty significantly underpaid. I just don't get how this is Howie's fault and not the players. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, he should have. he should have. I think I'm not sure he got the best advice. I'm not sure his agent is the one who's guiding him anymore on this, but everybody wants to have that security and have that contract, that long-term contract before, going into their contract year. But if, you bet on yourself sometimes, and guys have done that, and they hit free agency I guess the problem is if you have a bad year, you're not going to get that money. But yeah, Hassan's played this wrong every step of the way. And it's a shame. I like the guy. I think he's a good guy. He's a great player. The league's better with him being out there. So it's a shame.
Yeah. To add some context to it, he didn't have crazy big offers when the Eagles signed him, 3 years, $45 million. So he felt underpaid very soon after signing that deal. Yeah. He probably felt underpaid the second he put pen to paper. But look, like the league tells you what your value is. Your value is whatever teams are willing to pay you. But I can tell you from his perspective, he felt underpaid very quickly. And then even after the first year here, one of the new contracts, knew the Eagles, that's just something the Eagles don't do. They do not rip up contracts with 2 years left for the most part. So he wanted the contract after 22, didn't get it. Then after 23, it was very clear that something had to give there. Either the Eagles would have to trade him or they'd have to pay him, and they elected to trade him.
Yeah, and they had their reasons for it. He was 30, and they thought it was too much. He was asking for too much for a guy his age. And it was, and I just also think baggage is the wrong word, but he could be a difficult guy, as we're seeing, and I don't think that helps his value.
Yeah, maybe not. They could sure use him though.
So could the Jets.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break, and we have plenty more on the other side.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. All right, we're back on the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. We're going through your questions. A reminder, if you have questions for us, it's eagle-eye at NBC Uni. That's NBCUNI.com. Next question here from Justin. Hello, my name is Justin from Bethlehem, PA. This is my favorite Eagles podcast because I think the viewers get the best source of unbiased information and opinions about the team, all while still getting the ridiculously entertaining off-the-rails conversations. My question is, if Nick Sirianni is fired mid-season, who would be the most likely to replace him as the interim coach? Also, if Jalen's turnovers continue this way all year, what are the Eagles going to do with him going forward? Let's start with the Sirianni question, which is premature. We're in week 4, or week 5 now, I guess. We both think it's unlikely he gets fired during the season.
Extremely unlikely. I still think they're going to be a playoff team. Maybe I'm crazy. I guess it's possible they could be a playoff team and he still gets fired. I don't know if anyone's ever been fired after going 4 for 4 in the postseason. I'm sure it's happened somewhere. But I mean, if these kind of losses, I think the only way he gets fired midseason is if what we saw in Tampa keeps happening. I mean, if they're just non-competitive, for the next 6 games, that would get you to what, week 11. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to get guys back. Schedule gets easier. They don't have that many more road games in a row. They don't have so I don't think it's going to happen. But if there's a stretch of non-competitive football, then I think it's possible. As far as who would replace him, I mean, if you asked me a month ago, I'd say Kellen Moore. I think he's the obvious guy, but I'm not sure he's really helped his cause. I'm not sure you'd want Vic to do it. I don't know. Jamel Singleton, TJ Paganetti. I don't know if there's, and that's part of the reason it's rare. I mean, it happens, but you don't see a lot of coaches get fired in the middle of the season because now you have to change. I mean, things have to be really bad. You have to have a team that's given up on the coach, which might be happening in front of our eyes. Well, we don't know that yet, but you're talking about putting in a new scheme, new way of doing things, new way of meeting. But I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess Kellen Moore would be the favorite, but I don't think that would be the most popular decision because if Nick's getting fired, the offense is probably, not doing so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if it was early enough, you probably give it to Kellen Moore as like a tryout thing. But you're right. If Nick's getting fired, the offense probably isn't performing very well. But
now, if they're losing every game 56-48,
yeah, maybe. Jamal Singleton is the assistant head coach by title. So if Jeffrey looked at it and said, hey, I don't want to overload either of the coordinators, kind of like Antonio Pierce, kind of like give it to the position coach who kind of has a strong voice and then just let the coordinators handle what they're handling. That could be an option too. I think it'd be one of those two.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because if Nick gets fired, Kevin Patullo is getting fired too.
Yes.
I mean, this is not the only question we've gotten like that, and it's week 5, and it's very, very, very typical.
And they're 2-2.
Next question from Amen. Hello from California. I recently heard Slay talking about his leadership style, mentioning that he was the type of leader to bring joy and keep the spirits up, while Jalen was the more serious kind of leader. The interesting thing he mentioned was Kelsey and Cox being the types of guys who would yell at people. From your talks with players, do you think anyone has stepped up into that role this season? If not, do you think the lack of vocal veteran leadership is hurting this team consistently?
I know BG yells at guys because he told us he'll yell at Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. But, you just don't replace guys like Kelsey and Fletcher. And it's hard to be that kind of leader without that kind of resume. I mean, you don't have to be a future Hall of Famer, but there's not a lot of those type of guys on the team. I tend to think that whole leadership thing is overrated. I mean, if you stop the Falcons on that last drive, if you get a turnover, you're 3-1 and nobody's wondering about leadership. I think there's a place for it, but I think it's more like the Slay type, where you're working with young players and that kind of thing. But as far as guys yelling, I don't know how much Kelsey and Fletch did that in the first place. Maybe they probably picked and chose their spots. But I don't know. Maybe I don't really think that's a huge issue.
Yeah, I think there are some guys who do it a little bit. AJ Brown is one. We saw it in training camp a little bit, like getting vocal at times. But he obviously hasn't played the last 3 games. You're right. It has to be someone with the resume. Like Lane doesn't really have that in his personality to be a big yeller.
Right.
Certainly a leader. People listen to him, they follow him, but he's not going to be the, if Cam Jurgens screws something up, I don't think Lane's really got it in him to yell and scream at him. Yeah.
And there's leadership. He's leadership by example. And then there's vocal leaders and maybe they don't have enough, but I don't think that's a big issue.
Yeah. Jordan Mailata could do that a little bit.
Yeah. He'll yell a little bit.
Yeah. Next question from
usually
Next question to Jeff. Hey guys, love the podcast. Isn't it peculiar that the Jets never offered Bryce Huff a contract even after he posted 10 sacks last year? Do you think they knew his sacks were not legit and they were just a product of their defensive scheme?
I don't know. I think maybe we're seeing now maybe why they didn't. It's just not good. I mean, I haven't studied his 10 sacks from last year. I think a sack's a sack, but the difference might be that they were convinced he couldn't play on more than third down. Maybe the Eagles thought he could. I mean, I would love to hear the conversations between Joe Douglas and Howie Roseman about that. But
well, I don't know if they had those conversations.
I'm sure there were conversations when he's a free agent. I mean, Howie,
they'd theoretically be competing against each other for him.
I don't think the Jets wanted him.
Yeah,
but
they certainly didn't want him at 351.
No.
And it was a projection. We talked about it at the time. Like, he had been in a very limited role with the Jets. And if you're paying a guy $17 million a year, you're projecting him to be a starter. So it was always a projection. And I think it's one of those situations where the Eagles looked at it and thought they were going to gain an edge here. They were going to pay a guy before he was worth it, but they would ultimately get a discount. It clearly hasn't worked out that way. To me, I am shocked that he just hasn't been a factor at all as a pass rusher, because it wasn't just the 1 year. I know we had the 1 year of sack production, but you look at some of the advanced numbers, which is, we know the Eagles are trusting the advanced analytics on pass rushers. They showed that it wasn't a fluke, that 10 sack season. I don't know. I wonder if they have to recalibrate it all the way they approach a free agent like this.
Yeah. It's funny because Zach Bond, that was a projection as well. He only played a limited number of snaps at linebacker with the Saints, but Vic watched those snaps and projected, he can do this on a full-time basis. And it looks like he was right. It's a lot of projecting. You're not going to hit all those. I just can't believe how bad he is. I mean, has he been close to a quarterback?
Not really. He had one good rush that I can remember.
Yeah.
His solo tackle from the last game, I mean, the guy basically ran into him.
That's really bad. I mean, I was looking, people think Mike Mamula was a bust. Mike Mamula had 11 and a half sacks in his first year and a half. Bryce Huff is just, I mean, he's in that John Harris, Jerome McDougal, Marcus Smith range of just being a non-factor.
Yeah, and he's hurting you more than he's helping you right now. And that's a bad place to be, because he's a liability on rundowns. And as a pass rusher, he's not getting there. That's the one thing. And that's what surprises me the most. I thought there was at least a baseline here. There was a decently high floor for Bryce Huff, and he's in the basement right now.
I think when you're struggling that much, I mean, he basically failed to do what they asked him to do earlier in the season. I think when that happens, it's tough to just go out there. Well, I'm still good at this other part of the game. I just think he might be just mentally shot right now from the experience, getting 18 snaps in the Saints game. I think that went up a little bit Sunday, but yeah.
I think he had 32, 33. They had a lot of snaps. They had 77.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Tampa had a lot of plays. But yeah, it's well, I have a story that's going to run to tomorrow, Friday, on the 10 biggest disappointments, the Eagles' 10 biggest disappointments so far. And I think we agreed he's number one with a bullet.
Yeah. I haven't completely given up on him though, because you have to trust he was productive last year. There has to be something there. It doesn't evaporate.
Sometimes it does. Go to a new team.
I guess. He's still a young player.
He is. I mean, I haven't given up on Dotson. Kind of a similar thing, He wasn't the world's greatest player in Washington. He was disappointing as a first-round pick, but at least he was getting you 40 yards a game.
Yeah.
He's got 25 yards. Grant Calcaterra had more yards on one catch than he's got all year. That shouldn't be happening. So sometimes I think it's tough for free agents, or he wasn't a free agent, he was a trade, but coming into a new team, you got to move. Maybe you have kids. They have to, move into a new school. I just think there's a lot going on sometimes that we don't really know about. It's not an easy thing to do. But, I mean, you have to do it. But both those guys, certainly they're not alone having trouble with a new team. Top 4 guys on that list of most disappointing are guys how we got this offseason. So that'll be up on the site tomorrow morning.
Speaking of Jahan Dotson, next question from Jim. Now that Jahan Dotson appears to be a bust, can he contribute to the team by providing intel regarding the Washington offensive scheme? How much help can this information really provide? Well,
he can tell Vic that Jaden Daniels never throws a complete pass. I don't know if that'll help. It's kind of a indicative of the offseason how he had that. Dotson comes here and has 25 yards in 4 games, including 3 starts. Then OZ goes down there. Doesn't cost him a pick. I mean, he cost him a 3rd-round pick. Washington signs OZ for like $1.2 million, $1.3 million. They don't have to give up a pick. And he's like their leading receiver last week in a win over Arizona. That's a bad look. I don't think OZ's a great player, but he's got almost as many yards in 4 games with Washington as he had all year here. So that's not ideal. But no, I don't think there's anything Jahan Dotson can tell the Eagles about Washington's offense. I mean, he's got to worry more about the Eagles' offense and learning that one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit. They'll ask him, I'm sure, but
yeah,
they know Cliff Kingsbury. Heck, they had him in for an interview. They might pull from that a little bit. The Eagles use those interviews as intel gathering a lot of times. So,
yeah, maybe they should have hired him.
Maybe. Next question from Valentino. Good day, mate, from Mittagong, Australia. For reference, about an hour southwest of Sydney. I grew up a Philly sports fan as my mom is from Vineland, New Jersey, and I love your pod as it is both insightful and entertaining thanks to your great chemistry. Although this question is about Jalen Hurts, I'd like to preface this by saying I still believe he can figure it out. My question is specifically in regards to his mobility. As we know, he's had some injuries accumulate over the past few years, and his mobility seems a shadow of what it was in 21 and 22. If these injuries have taken a toll on his mobility, is it worth him slimming down a bit? I know his strength is important for the brotherly shove, and I'm by no means calling him fat, but I think there is a balance between strength and agility for a mobile quarterback. This was partly inspired by Lamar Jackson being 15 pounds lighter than last year and 30 pounds lighter than 2022.
First of all, Vineland, I'd like to say, didn't you work down there for a bit, down in Cumberland County?
I did.
Vineland, did you know that Vineland is the largest municipality in New Jersey in terms of volume?
Yeah, it's huge. A lot of land. Not a lot going on.
Landis, what is it? Landis Avenue down there. Mm-hmm. So, we all through training camp, we marveled at how fast he looked, how athletic he looked, how he looked so much. He was moving so much better than last year. And we saw it in one game. It's just weird. I don't get it. I think part of it is his judgment when to run. I mean, he hasn't looked as fast. He's had a couple of runs where he looks really fast. But for the most part, I don't know. It looks like he's running quicksand. I don't know if his weight – I don't sense that his weight's an issue. I think he's pretty fit. I don't know what's going on with that. And he's clearly not the runner he was. And I don't know why. I don't know why.
This is purely anecdotal, but it seems to me he's faster scrambling than he is in the RPO game. And I wonder if it's just like breaking himself of the read. The RPO game has been like pretty bad. I know they got a touchdown throw. It was like off schedule on that RPO game, but like when he decides to pull it, he looks slow. And I wonder if it's like breaking the read part of the play, because sometimes when he's scrambling, especially north to south, his wheels look pretty good.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. I'll have to look at that. it kind of would make sense. I mean, they're completely different ways of starting the run. I think it seems like it seemed to me like once he gets going, he looks fast. He just doesn't have that initial, I guess, explosive burst that he used to have. And if that's the case, a scramble would look faster because he's getting out into the open field when he has a chance to run in a straight line. He's looked pretty fast at times, but on an RPO, I don't think he has that luxury of getting that running start. I guess maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, got to start the engine and let it warm up before you drive, right?
Maybe he needs to warm up differently. He comes out late, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to change that. He's done it for 5 years now. He doesn't come out for early warm-ups. The first time we see Jalen on the field is in uniform.
Yeah. Yeah, that's weird. I think he's got to really change up his warm-up regimen. Like Carson would be out there 4 hours. Remember Carson used to do all those weird
the arm exercises?
Yeah. He would do all kinds of stuff down in the far corner there.
It is funny, like, because we have to be on the field pregame for hits, and you start to learn players like ritual.
Yeah.
And so many guys are just so set in their ways. They do the exact same thing every single day, down to like where they place their phone on the field. Jordan Mailata does the grounding with, he doesn't have shoes on. He's out there barefoot, even in cold weather. The new thing, Lane brings out that giant stick that he can like stretch with.
Yeah.
Which is always a scary sight. Like Lane walking around with like Donatello's stick. That's a Ninja Turtle reference.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for the explanation.
Yeah, sorry. All right, next, last question here from Brian. Dave and Rube, thanks for putting out such consistently good podcasts. As a former Air Force pilot, I wish I knew about you guys when I lived in California and South Dakota to stay plugged into the Eagles, but better late than never because the Eagles coverage in Boston is definitely lacking too. Dave, kudos to you for keeping Rube's ramblings in check, although I have to admit the times where Dave moves on and Rube is still spouting unrelated facts from his previous tangent provides some laugh-out-loud moments. Anyway, my question is, having never lived in Philly, do you think there are any other cities' fan bases that compare to the passion and honesty of Philly sports fans? Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate what you do. Keep up the good work, and I hope you get to enjoy some extra free time during the bye week.
And thank you for your service. I'm fascinated by aviation, so I'm not going to go on a tangent about that. But maybe we could have him on the podcast to talk about flying airplanes. Maybe not. What was the question? Oh, fans. I think what I've seen is that fans in cities that have had a team for a long time are the most, like, you go to Jacksonville, they don't care. You go to Phoenix, they're all people from Chicago. Half of them are Bears fans. You go to cities that have had a team like the Bears, the Packers, the Eagles. And I don't even put the Patriots in that because they're not even in Boston. They're not even that close to Boston. I'm sure Boston fans are that way as far as like the Red Sox or the Celtics. But I just think the thing about Philly is so many, like, I get this from fans all the time. Like, my grandfather would like taught my dad. My dad taught my grandfather's favorite player was, Dick Bilski. And you don't get that in a lot of markets. I just think there's a core of like Eastern franchises that have these fan bases where the fandom has been passed down from generation to generation. And if you don't have that, you can't have that level of rabid fans. So I think there's a handful of cities, Chicago, Green Bay, maybe, I guess, New York to an extent. But
there's a lot going on in New York.
Yeah, it's kind of homogenized. There's so many teams, and then you have the whole like Jets Giants thing. So they're competitive with each other, and they both suck most of the time. So I think in a small number of markets, it's similar. Yeah. What's been your experience? I mean, you go to stadiums all over the place.
Yeah. I think the Eagles fans are certainly like some of the best in the league. There are other good fans, though. I think you're right about like Northeast, Midwest fans. There's a lot of similarities, right? Like you think of Bears fans, Packers fans, Vikings fans to a certain degree, like Browns fans. Cleveland has a good.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't even have a team for 3 years.
Yeah, that wasn't the fans' fault.
No, I know, but yeah, I don't know. I guess Cleveland's like that.
I mean, they've been pretty happy to get a team back. They stink now, but
yeah.
Well, we'll see how much they stink, I guess, pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll see who stinks.
Yeah,
I guess Cleveland's in that. I mean, they used to win NFL titles all the time when in the old AAFC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Won like 5 straight.
Gosh, speaking about that, I feel so bad for the Athletics fans in Oakland.
Yeah.
Every time you see a team leave a city, like it's just, it's got to kill them.
And they've lost a couple now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to that stadium once, actually with an old colleague of ours, Harvey Melamed. I was out there for like a conference, like a journalism conference thing. And we went to a athletics game, an A's game. It's, man, you see, like they had a photograph. It was incredible. The groundskeeper standing on the mound crying and being consoled by one of the coaches. It was a really powerful image because it's just so big a part of people's lives. It's really sad.
Yeah.
And it's a shame they couldn't make it work out. And I mean, that's a franchise that has its roots in Philadelphia. They won 5 World Series. They're still the winningest professional team in Philadelphia history. The Athletics, they won 5 championships. That's a good trivia question, by the way. You can get a lot of people on that. There used to be a little athletics museum, and they weren't the A's until the 70s. Charlie Finley, their owner, changed the name from the Athletics to the A's. But there was a museum of Philadelphia Athletics Museum in Hatboro or Horsham. I think it was. I always get those two mixed up. I think it was in Horsham. It was really cool. They had so much memorabilia. They had a row of seats from the stadium, and all kinds of yearbooks and programs and bats and balls and gloves and signed stuff. It was really cool. And the A's actually helped support it. All these years later, when did they move out of Philadelphia in early 50s? When they withdrew their support, it went out of business and they sold off all the merchandise. It was really sad. So a lot of history there. Who's your favorite A? Your favorite athletic?
Lowercase. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Reggie Jackson, from Cheltenham, I think about.
Yeah. I
always love Vida Blue, but I don't want to go too deep on the A's.
Yeah, God forbid we do that. Thanks for everyone. We got to like half the questions. We just had so many, so we'll try to answer more next week. And if you have a question, you can send it eagleeye@nbcuni.com. If you're watching on YouTube, you have the QR code. I'll leave it up there for another few seconds while Rube says this.
Just happy for Sean Bradley, who has another opportunity to play. He signed with the Texans, with D'Amico, with the Texans practice squad. So happy for him. Good dude. And hope he gets to play again. Bad timing with his injury last year. So good to see him back in the league.
Yeah, definitely. He was a really good special teamer here for years. So you're right. His injury came in the last year of his contract. So where a guy like Zach McPherson was here in the summer trying to make the team, Sean Bradley didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, and I believe his position coach is Billy Davis.
Oh, wow.
Former Eagles defensive coordinator. And I think their defensive coordinator is Matt Burke.
Yeah, it is, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that like button, subscribe there as well. Everyone have a good weekend. Enjoy some stress-free football watching. I know that'll be nice for everyone. You don't have to tear your hair out watching the Eagles game. They can't lose this week. Enjoy it. Anything else, Rube?
No, I'm going to be enjoying football all day Sunday.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. For Rube, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you soon.